Hi guys, I'm going to do our daily read aloud. I found this one in the library. I've never read it. It's about dinosaurs. And apparently, it's a true story. So if we look at the front page, welcome to the Dinosaurs of Waterhouse, Hawkings. Now, this is written by Barbara Kearley with illustrations by Brian Selznick. The publisher on this is the Scholastic Press, and they have given us permission to do this read aloud today. The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkings, an illuminating history of Mr. Waterhouse Hawkings, artist and lecturer, by Barbara Kearley, with drawings by Brian Selznick, many of which are based on the original sketches of Mr. Hawkins. A true dinosaur story in 3 ages, from childhood love of art to the monumental dinosaur sculptures at the Crystal Palace in England, to the thwarted work in the New York Central Park. It's all here. Oh, it's a gorgeous picture. The first age, London. Horse-drawn carriages cluttered down the streets of London in 1853. Gentlemen tipped their hats to ladies passing by. Children ducked and dodged on their way to school. But Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins had no time to be out and about. Waterhouse, as he liked to call himself, hurried towards his workshop in a park south of town. He was expecting some very important visitors. He didn't want to be late. As he neared his workshop, Waterhouse thought of the hours he'd spent outside as a boy. Like many artists, he had grown up sketching the world around him. By the time he was a young man, he found his true passion: animals. He loved to draw and paint them. But what he really loved was sculpting models of them. Through his care and hard work, they seemed to come to life. This is a fabulous picture. Look at all those awesome animal drawings. So cool. Now, Waterhouse was busy with the most exciting project. He was building dinosaurs. His creations would prowl the grounds of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's new art and science museum, the Crystal Palace. Even though the English had found the first known dinosaur fossil many years before, and the bones of more dinosaurs had been unearthed in England since then, in 1853, most people had no idea what a dinosaur looked like. Scientists weren't sure either, for the only fossils were some bits and pieces, a tooth here, a bone there. But they thought if they studied a fossil and compared it to a living animal, they could fill in the blanks. And so, with the help of scientist Richard Owen, who checked every muscle, bone, and spike, that's exactly what Waterhouse was doing. He wanted to create such a perfect model that anyone, a crowd of curious children, England's leading scientists, or even the Queen herself, could gaze at the dinosaurs and see into the past. Kind of like a puzzle. Waterhouse threw open the doors to his workshop. Nervously, he tidied up here and there. His assistant came. Then Richard Owen. At last the visitors arrived. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The Queen's eyes grew wide in surprise. Waterhouse's creatures were extraordinary. How on earth had he made them? He was happy to explain. The Iguanodon, for instance, had teeth that were quite similar to the teeth of an iguana. The Iguanodon then must surely have looked like a giant iguana. Waterhouse pointed out that a few Iguanodon bones helped determine the model's size and the proportion. And another bone, almost a spike, most likely sat on the nose, like a rhino horn. Just so for the Megalosaurus, starting with its jawbone, compared it with the anatomy of a lizard. Fill in the blanks, and Viola, a dinosaur more than 40 feet long. Waterhouse was also making ancient reptiles and amphibians. While Richard Owen could imagine their shapes, it took an artist to bring the animals to life. I don't know if there ever was a giant walking iguana. But remember, this is before they knew what dinosaurs looked like. Designing the creatures was only the first step. There was still the monumental task of building them. Waterhouse showed his guests the small models he'd made, correct in every detail, from scales on the nose to the nails on the toes. With the help of his assistants, he had formed the life-size clay figures and created molds of them. Then he erected iron skeletons, built brick foundations, and covered the whole thing with cement cast from dinosaur-shaped molds. It is no less, Waterhouse concluded, than building a house upon 4 columns. Sounds awfully complicated. Cool looking. Let's read the signs. So the first step, I don't know if you can see this. The first step is drawing. The second step is a small model made out of clay. The third step is a life-size model, also made out of clay. Then the fourth step is to make a mold. You see that? That's the mold. The fifth step is the iron skeleton, which must be these things down here. And the sixth step is the finished dinosaur. It has to have bricks, tiles, and broken stones, all held together with cement, covered and cast and painted. Sounds like it was very heavy. In the weeks to follow, Waterhouse basked in the glow of the Queen's approval. But he would soon face a much tougher set of critics. England's leading scientists. Waterhouse wanted to be accepted into the circle of eminent men. What would they think of his dinosaurs? There was only one way to find out. Waterhouse would show them. But why not do it with a little style? A dinner party. On New Year's Eve, no less. And not just any dinner party. Waterhouse would stage an event that no one would forget. He sketched 21 invitations to the top scientists and supporters of the day. The words inscribed on a drawing of a pterodactyl wing. He pored over menus with the caterer. The iguanodon mold was hauled outside. A platform was built, a tent erected. As the hour drew near, the table was elegantly set, and names of famous scientists, the fathers of paleontology, were strung above the tent's walls. All was ready. With great anticipation, Waterhouse dressed for the occasion in his finest attire. He was ready to reveal his masterpiece. When the guests arrived, they gasped with delight. Waterhouse smiled as he signaled for dinner to begin. With solemn formality, the footman served course after course from silver platters. Up and down the steps of the platform they carried the lavish feast. Rabbit soup, fish, ham, and even pigeon pie. For dessert, there were nuts, pastries, puddings, and plums. 2 footmen stayed busy, simply pouring wines. For 8 hours the men rang in the new year. They laughed and shouted. They made speech after speech, toasting Waterhouse Hawkins. All the guests agreed the iguanodon was a marvelous success. By midnight, they were belting out a song created especially for the occasion. The jolly old beast is not deceased. There's life in him again. The next months passed by in concrete, stone, and iron as Waterhouse put the finishing touches on his dinosaurs. Inside the iguanodon's lower jaw, he signed the work B. Hawkins, Builder, 1854. The models were now ready for the grand opening of the Crystal Palace at Sadam Park. 40,000 spectators attended the regal ceremony. In the sun-filled center court, Waterhouse mingled with scientists and foreign dignitaries. At last, the Queen arrived. The crowd cheered, "Hurrah!" Cannons boomed, music swelled, and the choir of 1,000 voices sang. Waterhouse bowed before the Queen. Then she and Prince Albert invited the spectators to enjoy the amazing sights. Waterhouse hurried to the lake and waited for the crowds to arrive. First 2, then 10, then a dozen more. Gasped, shrieked, laughed, and cried. So this was a dinosaur. So that building there is the Crystal Palace. Really cool. Amazing. I love this drawing. Look at the hats too. That's cute. Those don't look like, well, that one dinosaur in the lake looks like a dinosaur that might have been real. The rest look a little funny. Waterhouse was thrilled, for in addition to being an artist, he also saw himself as a teacher. He was convinced that the best way for people to learn about something was to see it. With this love of art and teaching, he knew he could do more. Educational posters, small models anyone could buy, lectures, books to illustrate. For the next 14 years, Waterhouse did all. News of his success had reached America. In 1868, Waterhouse traveled to New York City, filling a lecture hall for the talks about dinosaurs, evolution, and even dragons. As he spoke, he sketched such marvelous illustrations that the audience burst into applause. He must have been really talented. And then Waterhouse received a delightful surprise, a letter from the head of Central Park, inviting him to build American dinosaurs. His models would inhabit a museum planned for the park's southwest corner. Waterhouse was excited. America's first 2 dinosaurs, a Hadrosaurus and a Laelaps, had only recently been discovered. Here was his chance to bring those dinosaurs to life for all to see. That's him teaching. The Second Age, America. I'll show you this picture again in a second. Waterhouse set right to work. He spent the next 6 months traveling to American museums to learn about American dinosaurs. Again, he built something no one had ever seen before, the first model of a complete dinosaur skeleton. He presented the Hadrosaurus to the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, where it was welcomed with great enthusiasm. Now, Waterhouse was ready to build his dinosaurs. He returned to New York City to the workshop built for him in Central Park. He hired an assistant, and the real work began. Small models, life-size clay figures, iron skeletons, dinosaurs. While he and his assistant toiled inside, workmen outside began building the museum. Like the Crystal Palace, the Paleozoic Museum would be an enormous structure of iron and glass with a beautiful arched ceiling. Day after day, workmen dug the foundation. It looks like the book got a little wet here. That's the plan. Looks like it's going to be really pretty. Then disaster struck. William Boss Treed, a corrupt politician who controlled much of New York City, said the museum was a waste of money. At 6 feet tall and 300 pounds, Boss Treed was a big man with an even bigger thirst for power. He reorganized the Parks Department and put his own men in charge. Waterhouse watched in dismay as the work on the museum was stopped. He began looking for a new home for his dinosaurs, but he was frustrated that a thieving scoundrel could thwart almost 2 years of his work. In March of 1871, Waterhouse gave a speech at the New York Lyceum of Natural History. He stressed the importance of science and art, then shared the troubles he had with the boss. I trust, however, Waterhouse concluded, that in time the good sense of the people will awaken and that they will realize the vast importance of my work. The audience agreed. One man called the boss greedy. Another said that the boss was an enemy of mankind. The New York Times printed it all. I think that's a picture of the boss. Not sure. Waterhouse carried on with his work, but on May 3rd, his dreams were shattered. Vandals broke into his workshop. Welding sledgehammers, they smashed the dinosaurs. Then they carted the pieces outside and buried them in the park. Waterhouse arrived to find chaos, chunks of rubble, mangled wire, plastic shards, and dust. He simply could not believe it. I'd be really upset. He looks really upset. Waterhouse stumbled outside, only to find mounds of dirt and dinosaur rubble. 2 years of his life utterly ruined. This could only be the work of Boss Tweed. The more Waterhouse thought about it, the angrier he became. He protested to the Parks Department. The situation was outrageous, criminal. Surely something could be done. But Waterhouse was bluntly told not to waste his time with dead animals when there were so many living ones around. Waterhouse staggered away. His dinosaurs were broken, and so was his spirit. But in spite of the boss, Waterhouse would give America dinosaurs. He left New York to create towering hadrosaur skeletons for Princeton University in New Jersey and the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. He stayed at Princeton, yet again creating something that no one had ever seen before. The first series of paintings showing the development of life on Earth, including his beloved dinosaurs. Waterhouse was now 71 years old. It was time to go home. Remember, he's not from America. The third age, home again. Waterhouse returned to London, and exciting news. 30 iguanodon skeletons had been discovered in a coal mine in Belgium. It now appeared that Waterhouse's beloved iguanodon might have walked upright on its hind feet, and the spike on the nose, like a rhino's horn, might actually be a thumb. Imagine that. Waterhouse settled back into his cottage fossil villa near the Crystal Palace. And on pleasant afternoons, as he walked to the park and his marvelous creations, he wondered, What other surprises would scientists dig up as they search the world for dinosaurs? Look at his imagination going. Just as he had hoped, his models were the start of something wonderful. The world's first encounter with these ancient animals. People still come to Crystal Palace Park. People still come to the Crystal Palace Park in England to see the dinosaurs of Waterhouse, Hawkings. I didn't know they were still there. And while his American dinosaurs no longer stand somewhere buried in Central Park, pieces of his dinosaurs remain. This is great. Love it. Oh, look at this. I got a beautiful drawing at the end of the book. Look at all the dinosaurs. He was such a cool man. Thank you guys for joining me for the read aloud. I'll see you later.